I'm Britton LaRue, and this is Moon to Moon. Moon to Moon is a space to consider, celebrate, and share the ways we come home to ourselves, anchor through change, and uncover our power. 1 month, one phase, one loving step at a time. Hello, Moon to Moon. It's Britton, and I'm recording this introduction to my conversation with astrologer Sabrina Monarch as the moon in Cancer is rising in the east. I'm so excited to share this conversation with Sabrina. We have an interesting history, Sabrina and I. First, let me read Sabrina's bio in case you don't know Sabrina, so that I can ground you into some information about her, and then I'll share a little bit of an anecdote that I think is really beautiful. It's a little vulnerable, but I'm going to go for it. So Sabrina's official bio is: Sabrina Monarch is an evolutionary astrologer, counselor, coach, and author novelist. She gained an unconventional education in creative writing by discovering an online writing community at age 12 and gaining dozens of mentors across the globe who would help her learn how to write for the next several years. She developed an interest in astrology at a young age as well, and took her craft deeper in her early 20s at the same time that her psychic abilities were noticeably coming online. She writes forecasts at monarchastrology.com, produces video forecasts on YouTube, and is the host of a podcast about spiritual lifestyle and personal evolution called Magic of the Spheres. She teaches astrology online, including an all levels Evolutionary Astrology intensive and advanced alumni courses. Sabrina is widely appreciated for her poetic voice and capacity to name subtle, abstract undercurrents of any particular astrological moment. She has an MA in Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness from the California Institute of Integral Studies and currently resides in Portland, Oregon, soon in Greece. I love this bio very much. In the years that I've been witnessing Sabrina, I feel like her bio here really pulls out some of the things that I've been most taken with, notably Sabrina's ability as a wordsmith, as a poetic and evocative speaker, translator, writer, communicator of astrological energies, archetypes, and that which is being communicated through Sabrina. I mean, you really feel with Sabrina an absolutely embodied mysticism. And being around her, whether that's through having her light up your feed and Instagram or be someone whose voice that you're tuning into regularly, will absolutely deepen your relationship to this language. There's just no getting around it. If you let Sabrina into your field, you will grow as an astrologer, as someone who lives astrology, practices astrology, reads astrology, and wants to let it move through you. So, Sabrina, I want to focus this up front. Sabrina's teaching that Evolutionary Astrology intensive again this spring. That cohort begins April 2nd, and the deadline to apply is March 29. So this is an intensive that I first heard about through our shared friend, our shared favorite person, our shared student, Jonathan Coe, who's no stranger to Moon, and to the student community around my school, because Jonathan is someone who began as my student and then became a teaching assistant and then became a teaching collaborator of mine. And back in the day that I was teaching Jonathan, this was 2020, and Jonathan was deeply taken by astrology and began studying through different teachers, through different lenses, different methodologies. I found out about Sabrina through that connection, and likewise, Sabrina found out about me. And for a long time, I just sort of watched Sabrina as a model for someone who is holding this like strong Piscean mystic frequency that is grounded in this like depth of power and honest language, but also a very strong personal voice. A very personal voice comes through with the way Sabrina communicates. And when I first started watching Sabrina, Sabrina was very much someone that was like a picture of what being a mystical astrologer could look like for someone like me, who is more of a beginner in this role that I now feel that I inhabit very easily. When I first found out about Sabrina, Sabrina was the one who had more experience with this. And I've taken some of Sabrina's workshops and have found that Sabrina is an excellent, excellent teacher and really speaks with passion, with sincerity, and also with this kind of like sharpness in terms of pointed truth, like, this word, not another word. This is the word, and that for me is like, so sexy. Like I love care around word choice. So Sabrina is Pisces rising. We talk a lot about her chart. Sabrina's Pisces rising with an Aries sun. And we talk a lot about the nodes and Pluto in this episode, in both her chart and my chart, because what this episode is really about is, what is evolutionary astrology? I don't know evolutionary astrology. This is not the strand of astrology that I have spent my time studying and practicing, but I've always been aware of it and very intrigued by it, and like read a little of this and learned a little bit about that. But it was just really powerful to be able to sit with someone who teaches evolutionary astrology year after year and has held space for so many wise practicing astrologers who move through Sabrina's intensive and then often go on to her alumni advanced containers to go out and then do really interesting work with their relationship to astrology. And if you're aware of evolutionary astrology, it is a strand of astrology that where Pluto and the nodes take up a lot of power in terms of delineation and technique. And so that's a lot of what we talked about here. So there's a lot here in this episode for those of you who are astro nerds, who want to learn about evolutionary astrology, who are curious, like, what is this? If you want to learn more about the nodes and the role of Pluto in the chart from this particular perspective. And I really want to thank Sabrina for being willing to pull up my chart, because I admitted that I thought that would be really fun, because I've never had an evolutionary astrology reading. I've always just tried to like guess what somebody who studied in this would say about my chart, given that I have Pluto at the North Node, and then I have my moon square the nodes. I knew that interesting things would come through, and indeed they did. So So I'm excited to get this to you. In the show notes, you'll be able to get information through the links to learn about Sabrina's class. Apparently, she offers it twice a year sometimes. So if you miss the gate to get into the spring 2024 cohort, you can always try again at another time, because this is like a foundational class for Sabrina. And I wanted to share before we begin that I did look up our composite chart, and sure enough, we have a Pisces rising chart with a Pisces moon, Mercury, Venus exactly at the ascendant. And then we have a 0 Aries sun. And one of the topics that we get into in this conversation is how we both share this spring equinox energy in both of our charts, because I'm a Pisces Aries rising and she's a Pisces rising Aries sun. And we both just see that in the other person, this kind of Pisces Aries walk that we're each doing. And then we both have earth moons. And it's like, I see what you're doing there. I'm impressed. So for those of you who find composite charts interesting, yeah, we also have the midheaven at the galactic center in Sagittarius, which is pretty cool. All right, then. I'm going to hand this over to the musical interlude composed by our shared friend and star student, Jonathan Coe, who is the creator of Moon to Moon's music, if you didn't know. And I look forward to seeing you on the other side of the episode, where I have some more things to share with you. Cheers. Welcome to Moon, Sabrina.
Thank you for having me, Britton.
I'm so happy to have you. I was with you on your podcast a couple months ago. We talked about Sagittarius together. So I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. And I know you just finished the Unshaming series. It was your birthday and your book came out. So I feel like there's a lot of celebration. And I'm just honored to be in your company at such a radiant moment, really celebrating everything that you've created.
Thank you. I feel your sincere your sincere celebration, and I just love it. I think we have a lot of mutual resonance, probably through the human being that connected us, which is Jonathan Coe.
Right. Yeah, Jonathan is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, I would see you two collaborating, and that's how I found you. And I know we both have this like Aries Pisces thing going on. So you and I have like a lot of resonance, and then also connected by someone really dear to us.
Yes. Hello, Jonathan, if you're listening. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Aries rising with the Pisces stellium, Sun, Mercury, Venus, and then you are Pisces rising with Mercury, Venus, Mars, right? And then Aries Sun.
Right. Yeah, so we get that like emergent, you call it emergence astrology, like that kind of connection to being in the oneness, and then also being this like really distinct Aries individual, which like I love this path. I love that energy. Like I
Yeah.
love the cosmic connected quality of it, but also the individuality and having that kind of Aries chutzpah spark, like boldness inside of what would otherwise sometimes be quite overwhelming, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like understanding myself as, and you may resonate with this, as someone who's very spring equinox, it just maybe explains a little bit why I feel like I'm constantly composting and rebirthing practically daily.
Right. Same.
And then we both have Earth moons. I didn't know that you had a Taurus moon, or at least I forgot. And then I have moon square Pluto, and you have moon opposite Pluto.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Moon Pluto.
Yeah. I think we'll probably get there some today. Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk with you. You consider yourself an evolutionary astrologer. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think that defining myself as an evolutionary astrologer is like the simplest way to convey to people, like my practice. I do feel really interdisciplinary, and I've picked up different modalities over the years, but evolutionary astrology has been my foundation for a decade now. And it's something that I just really orient to at the root, and everything I add to it is like a synthesis and a fusion to it. So I would say I'm definitely grounded in it.
Yeah, I would love for you to share with listeners and honestly with me more about what is evolutionary astrology and how is it distinct from other forms of astrology, but also related to the rest other forms of astrology, and just really invite us into that whole world. Feel free to take up as much space as you like.
Thank you. It's a modern branch of astrology that was channeled by Jeffrey Wolf Green, and he was connected to, lineages of astrology before that. I think especially influenced by Dane Rudhyar, it feels like. Um, but it's a Pluto-centered astrology where the natal chart is approached from the perspective of Pluto at the bottom line, as a signature of that soul resonance, that really deep desire that we keep coming back for. And so there's kind of like the way I've come to understand it in terms of the reincarnation side of evolutionary astrology is that we are working with maybe like a set of like past lives in a given lifetime. So kind of like if you have an experience and it triggers a sequence of memories in this lifetime, it's like this lifetime triggers a sequence of past lives that are, something was churning, something was working, and we didn't quite finish it all the way. It's a context in which like there's a fractal quality to this lifetime, and that it seems complete. It has its own story, but it's actually part of a bigger story in a multi-lifetime sense. I don't get that granular about particular past lives. I don't pick out particular past life stories or past life traumas or something like that. But it's more like locating these places in our lives that's really loaded. Like there's something like a karmic impasse or a karmic crossroads where we're kind of scheduled in this lifetime to figure it out in some sense. Or it's like the deep, deep familiarity. Like I think it is a way of reading the chart in a way that kind of hits a chord that's closer to the subconscious and the unconscious. Like it's felt, it's resonant, but it goes to that deeper place because we're working with Pluto, which relates so much to the unconscious. And then evolutionary astrology also works with the lunar nodes a lot. So the nodes of the moon, south node, north node, which I think people generally understand the south node to be like your past or past life signature, and the north node is like your destiny or north star in this lifetime. Definitely in Vedic astrology, the nodes are considered differently. I think they're considered differently in Hellenistic also. I kind of have been influenced by a lot of different astrologies' perspective on the nodes because, for example, in Vedic, there's part of the North Node that's connected to greed. It's like really hungry. It's this head of a dragon, and the South Node's the tail, and the head and the tail have been severed. So in some sense, there's like this endless kind of releasing quality of the South Node, and then this endless hunger of the North Node because it doesn't have a connection to its own stomach. So that could be understood as like our North Node is a place where Western astrology will talk about it as like, this is the thing to develop for your soul's evolution. And if you really go for your North Node, you'll know how intense and, greedy or whatever it can get. So I mean, I hold both of those, but still there's something about like when I find myself personally at karmic crossroads, I kind of have these patterns that I've learned in my chart that are like the deep, deep stuff that I'm working on. The place where when my life gets really dramatic, when I'm particularly activated, there's really similar patterns that happen every time in different ways, different stories, different costumes it takes, but it comes down to some really key lessons that I'm learning in this life. um, which for me, I have South Node in Cancer and North Node in Capricorn. And I have planets squaring the nodes, which is also a big deal in evolutionary astrology. But part of my chart has really just been learning about how to mature and grow up in this Capricorn way, you know, and that I'm very precious, actually. Like I have South Node in Cancer. I've been gifted with a lot of protection and care in my life. I really do know how to elicit care from people and how to be protected. And I have a massive capacity to create a comfort zone. And every now and then, like life, or often more so now after Saturn return, my life gives me this challenge of like, you can't stay in the nest forever. Like you can't stay in this place that's comfortable. You need to go face the cold, hard elements, Capricorn, and grow up. Right. And so I've had these different experiences that enforce that lesson. I also have Venus, Mercury in Pisces and a out of sign square to my nodes. And I have a massive, like, oceanic uh, sensuality, love, nature, capacity for ecstasy. And it's like I've had to learn over time how to even have the capacity and energetic structure, Capricorn, to contain that. I had struggles with like love addiction or being really not discerning in love, you know, or just kind of getting into situations that were me being in over my head because I hadn't matured properly. So there's a lot of different ways I could tell those stories and novels and like grand narratives, but they come down to really simple things that I'm just learning. And I think evolutionary astrology can offer those perspectives, those like bottom line to the point. What are you learning in your life? And most of the time, the nature of being like a human with a personality and like the game of having an incarnate identity is that we kind of forget our soul. We forget this past life arc that we're working on, and we get really seduced by the matrix of this reality and our current lifetime, our current egoic energy. So we get lost in the story, lost in the sauce, you know? I feel like evolutionary astrology is like decoding, okay, here's this like big story or all these things that are happening, these things you want really bad, these things you get kind of repetitively triggered by, or these kind of trauma signatures. What is the actual lesson or undercurrent beneath all of that? And so that's been a massive gift. I was really blessed to come into it when I was 21. So I grew up with it, went through Saturn return with it, and it really guided me in that like very, very formative years. But I'll pause there.
Thank you. Yeah, and so do you turn to the rulers of those nodes and then where they're placed in your chart to give you some hints as to how to keep working with the nodes?
Exactly. Yeah, like I have South Node in Cancer ruled by the moon in Taurus, which is opposite Pluto. Hence these repetitive struggles that I've had with like deep, you know, attachment stuff, which has been important lessons in some sense. But then my North Node is in Capricorn and it's ruled by Saturn in Aquarius. And so when I first got to know that, my earliest nascent concept of that was like, I should be an online business person. Like I should be like I should have a website. I need to build online architecture. Which
Wow.
I did, you know, but it was like also a vision of what if I had a really massive community? Like what if the intense love and energy that I have that I'm laser focusing at one person to my detriment is actually meant for thousands of people? That was kind of how I thought of it when I was And so that encouraged me of like, maybe I need an audience. Maybe I need a big community. Maybe I need like an actual network, Aquarius. Because I was like to an extreme, kind of like putting all my eggs in one basket of like a person that I was making my everything. And
Mhm.
that's very romantic in some kind of sense, but also just like not, you know?
Saturn Aquarius is like, take it to the many.
Yeah.
Mhm. You have so many planets either exalted or in domicile.
Yeah, lucky me. I also have I have Mercury in Pisces retrograde and Jupiter in Virgo, and those rule my angles. So I feel like I do have this mix of highs and lows that's really part of my signature and story.
Yeah, yeah. Does evolutionary astrology do like recognize the what are they called? Essential dignities, the way that you would see that in other astrologies?
They actually don't. And it's really funny. Like when I was younger and first into evolutionary astrology, there's this really radical idea around it that no planetary placement is good or bad, that that's
Mm.
just a human judgment, that it's a subjective human judgment. I no longer am fully of that. Like I do recognize essential dignities and like the experience of that, but it was a really cool way to learn astrology, and it's always stuck with me that we can't be limited in our thinking about what a planet is capable of or why we would have those particular signatures. Because, like, I'm sure you like feel into this a lot in yourself and with clients and whatnot, is that like we don't all have the same energetic signature. Like, we have different paths, we have different skills, talents, needs, strategies for living and thriving. And I think that there's something about the placements that are in fall or detriment where they just do things unusually. And planets that are, well resourced also incarnate, it's not just good all of the time. It's like a well-resourced Mars. The people I know who have well-resourced Mars, it's like they've had to go to battle in a lot of ways. Like they've been given a lot of martial initiations. It hasn't been easy for them,
Mm.
like Venus in Pisces is exalted, but I know so many Venus and Pisces people, including myself, that just get totally lost in the sauce and are just like in like the most like out there, like beyond. I mean, you have it too,
I do.
actually.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't
It
know.
hasn't been all easy. It
No.
needs its own strategies.
Yeah. It's like learning discernment, how to not be in fantasy. But there's such a big love in Venus and Pisces, and I feel really grateful for that. It's been a
Hmm.
lot to learn how to hold. It's definitely,
Yes.
yeah,
To hold in a way that's like sustainable and nourishing for you, the holder of it. Hmm.
yeah, yeah, not projecting it so much onto the other life, like remembering this like
Hmm.
internal dimension of Venus.
Yeah. So what I'm curious about with evolutionary astrology is like how then does Pluto relate to the nodes? And like what if like in your chart they're not by aspect, right? The Pluto with your nodes?
It's by sign, but not in orb. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so essentially, Pluto is the desire nature. It'd be cool to talk about this too, maybe with our charts, or I love
Hmm.
talking about
Yeah.
different Pluto generations. Um, it's our essential desire nature. And it is actually quite personal. Like it is a generational signature to an extent, but it's located in a house and we still have our own personal part of that hive consciousness that's very real and like very embedded in our subconscious and our drives and whatnot. So Pluto's that story of what we really, really want. Um, and our relationship with desire is not always on the surface. Often there's a lot that's buried. Um, and so Pluto can also relate to situations we attract that get us into contact with our desire. It shows us our low dream and our high dream. So there's a nightmare and a biggest dream that happens with Pluto. And it's connected to desire, you know? Like if your strongest desire is to be like a lauded performer who like people adore, and your nightmare that manifests with that is people picking on you, telling you that you're not talented, shaming your voice and whatnot. So it's like those experiences that are really challenging also show up with Pluto. And then the nodes are how the personality has adapted to strategize with that desire nature. So the Pluto is like what you want, that quality, and the nodes are a little bit of how. And the interesting thing about the nodes too, say like the South Node as a signature related to the past, is that our personality perpetuates karma. So a particular personality structure of any of the signs is going to create realities that then the personality continues to respond to, and it creates these loops. So we're inside of our own little ego matrix. And that's why the North Node can be so evolutionary, is because it's the opposite archetype of our most habituated patterns.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm like, okay, I need this repeated. The opposite archetype, the South Node
Yeah.
is
North Node.
the North Node is the opposite archetype of our habituated patterns. Yeah, I mean that's painful.
Right. And I mean, that is the main way that the nodes go. If you have planets square the nodes, which you and I both have, there's been a ping pong energy back and forth between the nodes that's created more of a hybrid form of the nodes, like going to extremes. And the planet square the nodes represents the impasse, the nature of the impasse that you're seeking to kind of harmonize through the nodes. So that one takes
nature of the impasse. Tell me what you mean by this. Because I really want to understand it.
Yeah, we can look at our charts for this
Yeah.
too.
Because I think that's my moon. And maybe you would say
Mars.
my Mars is too, my chart ruler.
Oh yeah,
But it's
mostly
not as
moon,
close
yeah.
by orb.
So in evolutionary astrology, sometimes it's called like a skipped step. Like basically you're trying to do something related to that planet that's square the nodes and missing a step in the evolutionary experience. So you kind of have to go back and retrieve it in this life. And I would say, you know, like the planets square the nodes, most people really feel the nature of that conflict in their lives. Like it is a significant impasse. And there's one node in particular that it resolves through. It's the node it last made a conjunction with before you were born. There's a pretty easy way to like just see that by eye. And yet it's also a balance of both of the nodes that really matters with that. So I just offer that because sometimes, you know, the easiest way to talk about the nodes is like South Node is where you've been, North Node is where you're headed. But when people have planets square the nodes, they've actually done both and are working on a more complex synthesis of those archetypes where there's been like a extreme reactivity to each. So I could use our nodes as examples for that. Like you have the Aries.
Yeah, let's do it.
Nodes. So
and that's your sun then. That's
Aries.
square.
Oh, my
Right?
sun is out of orb.
Out of orb. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you able to pull up the
Yeah.
charts? That might be fun.
So starting with yours, we even have first house Aries and seventh house Libra. So that's like all similar archetypally. Sometimes there's more archetypes that get mixed in because of the house significations. But the way I would look at the South Node in Aries traditionally, say there were no squared planets, there would be some kind of storyline where you've had a strategy around doing things alone and having a lot of personal strength in order to do that, having a lot of personal will, and like just being able to be like a winner, someone that just like gets it done and like does what they want and like needs a lot of independence. And when that is a strategy over and over again, what can happen is that situations in life show up where a little bit of collaboration, learning how to work with people, learning how to understand like those social cues and whatnot would actually help the South Node and Aries person get to their destination in a more pleasant way, and perhaps like not having to fight all the time to get their way in life. If you reverse that and it's a South Node and Aries person, that strategy has been a lot about collaboration and making everything nice and harmonic. And then the situation that's evolutionary that they run into is that sometimes they're around people that aren't collaborative. They're around people that are really difficult, and they're just like trying to like fawn and make sure everything's okay. And they actually have to learn how to assert themselves and maybe choose their battles instead of making everything nice. So because you have the square to the nodes, it could be, I would be curious how you've related to this or experienced this, that there could have been a back and forth around like being really relationship focused, getting really involved in connections, and then that becoming so overbearing in some sense, especially because you have Pluto and Libra in the seventh, and being like, I need to do my own thing, I'm going to be my own person. And then doing that and getting kind of lonely, and then pinging right back into the over involved relationship until a little bit more of like a balance and synthesis was found where you can be autonomous, connected to your desire, connected to your impulse in connection. So it doesn't have to be like a seesaw between connection and independence.
Yes, deeply resonate with that. And it's just ongoing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, the Aries Libra, I feel like because it's cardinal, it's so moment to moment, like you'll get new opportunities to like do that relational dance as new things emerge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like trusting in holding my autonomy while being sort of collaborative, cooperative feels sometimes almost like it's going to kill me. Like it feels so hard to
Right.
try to hold both at the same time rather than flip-flopping.
Yeah, that's interesting. You use that language, like it feels like a lot's on the line with it. And that would make sense because that's the impasse in this life. And you have like Moon in Capricorn in the 10th, Jupiter's even squaring it out of sign. It's in that kind of 10-degree orb. So something around like if that particular pattern has ever involved a sense of your life in the public or your sense of being like a contributing member of the world, a sense of obligation or duty or responsibility to be a good person or to do right by yourself and the relationship, like that, the weight of the moon in Capricorn, that's like, this decision really matters. Like there's consequences to my actions, like the weightiness then of it that's making that decision about whether you need to do something for yourself or for the other, you know, and even I guess through the synthesis of collaboration at a deeper, you know, Pluto and Libra has a desire nature. I love this generation. I love Pluto and Libras because they have like a depth of relating. Like sometimes it goes to an extreme and they're in like extremely imbalanced relational patterns, but there is like this natural charisma gift, capacity to deeply connect. I think of you know, Libra as a compare and contrast situation. It's like our relationships teach us something and we teach others, and there's this exchange. But Pluto takes it to this deeper level where it's like codes, deep codes are being exchanged. And so I imagine that Pluto and Libra in the seventh house, like your relationships are of great importance to you. And that like figuring out how to feel like you actually belong as like a full individual person, that you don't lose yourself, that you still get to connect deeply has been like part of the underlying dance of these signatures.
1000%. Yes. And I feel like I just like to go so deep that I can't really feel like I can take on more than a handful of close relationships.
Hmm. Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
letting me
looking at
read
that.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a, s- is there a way of conceiving Pluto at one of the other ends of the nodal axis from an evolutionary astrology point of view?
Yeah, the North Node conjunct Pluto, which you have, signifies like a a certain type of like urgency and willingness in this life to evolve, like that you're down for the Pluto initiations. This actually adds another layer. I often have thought of like your social media presence as this like Eros ascendant thing because I feel like your messages are really striking. I think also like you're unshaming the signs project. It's like you did all this alchemy of considering like what's the hardest emotional experience of these signs and what can I offer? Like it was
Hmm.
very resourcing. Like you went to the deep conflicts of those signs and meditated on them. And I think meditated on them in a way that was very personal, like very connected to empathy and like you went there. And I feel like the Pluto North Node in Libra in the seventh house is like this deep willingness for reconciliation and peace work in this life.
Mm.
And peace work can take a lot of different forms, but I think like working with ideas and being like, what's the most difficult, like meaty issue of them? And how can I like make it more beautiful? How can I bring harmony and like relationality and like love and acceptance to it?
I love
Ruled
that.
by Venus and Pisces.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do love to quote unquote go there.
Let's go there.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to see your chart and look at how the skipped step or the squared um let's
Yeah.
see. Let me orient myself. There's your notes. Okay. So your north node is in the 10th.
Yeah. South Node and Cancer in the fourth. So there's been so many ways this has showed up for me. This like Venus, Mercury, it's close in degree, just out of sign, because it's like really
Mhm.
close to the first degree of Aries here.
Right.
Um, the Venus, Mercury, and Pisces on like close to the ascendant is this really lyrically unhinged lover in me.
Lyrically unhinged.
It's like very doesn't have a lot of boundaries and has like very deep overwhelming oceanic sensations. So
Mm.
I think that the resolution node in my chart is the north node. You whenever you have planets square the nodes, you go in a clockwise direction, and that will show you the last node that it hit.
Yes.
But essentially, like my precious South Node in the like fourth house Cancerian experience has its gifts, but I remember even like learning how if I was in like a group, just saying whatever was on my mind, in a boundaryless way, wasn't necessarily contributing to the conversation, or it maybe lacked context. So something about building, right, and like being more socially minded in this kind of like broader 10th house way. Um, I mean, I also like I share a lot of my personal story. Like I am kind of like a diaryist. I've written two like autobiographical novels. I share personal stories all the time, but I always do it these days in the last years around really radically accepting and being in almost like this sobriety process around it with Capricorn, so that I have unshamed the story. It's not, I'm not spilling it out and like seeking containment. I'm sharing it as an offering because I'm holding myself, Capricorn. This has also just kind of been like, I've always, I think, wanted certain things that were maybe ahead of my own time, like wanting, you know, a husband, life partner, like the one, you know, before I was actually really ready for that, in some sense. And so I think I would, yeah, just kind of throw myself into certain situations where I end up having to learn, you know, I think I'm more in touch with like my actual range and capacity than I used to be. But the overwhelm, the kind of flooding of Venus, Mercury, it's like there was a lot of unconscious emotional material for me to work through. I think a lot of also like victimization, the like, you know, I'm vulnerable and I'm so hurt and like life is wounding me all the time, you know, versus like, how do I take responsibility and build my world and like have like proper boundaries. So, you know, because that was an issue, because that was something that was unresolved, the extreme of going back between Cancer and Capricorn would be like welling with all this emotion that I know some of it's off, or I know some of it is uninitiated or immature. And so because of that, it's like, what am I even supposed to do with it? Let me just put it in a box. Like, let me stuff it. And then the box, the constriction, the shame becomes too unbearable that it kind of explodes. And then I'm in the explosion. And then I'm embarrassed and ashamed. So I put it back in the box and whatnot, you know? And so I've had to learn how to like feel my emotions in real time, how to not be ashamed of my feelings, how to recognize them, how to communicate them. And like things that are almost like very simple humaning that were very overwhelming for my Mercury Venus experience because my inner life is so cinematic, so deep. You know, these placements trine Pluto. So I would be having like a whole emotional experience that I just didn't know how to even process or translate or be with. Um, so I think, you know, Cancer Capricorn people can be really skilled counselors or like they understand like the human condition or like initiations into maturity in a really personal way when they've gone through the lessons of it instead of resisting it. So I think like all of these experiences have helped me in terms of being like a coach and an astrologer and whatnot. But I just feel like my public life, my career, what I share is like always has to be really connected to what's true emotionally. Um, you know, like posturing or being like trying to be put together when I'm not. Like all those kind of things have been just really maybe sensitive points for those nodes. Yeah, that's what's coming to mind.
And how I'm curious how you relate to your Pluto in the ninth house.
We talked a little bit about this on our podcast with you and the Unshaming Sagittarius, because evolutionary astrology uses sign and house correlations, which is very contested in the broader astrology world, but I like it. But it's basically that there's like a Sagittarian quality to the ninth house. So Pluto and Scorpio in the ninth house is like a very deep desire to know, like such that even maybe, and this is true in my case, like some forms of extrasensory or prophetic perception come through because there's like such a desire to understand that it becomes, there's like an occult side of it with the Pluto and Scorpio. But I would say that it's this part of me that really wants to be on the up and up, living my best life, having a big, larger than life, magical, like blowout experience. And the ways that I've felt disempowered around that, like I don't have the capacity for that big life. I don't have, you know, or I'm too jaded to be optimistic, or something has happened in my story, ninth house, that makes me feel like I can't access that anymore. and then finding the kind of deeper internal capacity for expansion that's not disempowered by a difficult life experience. Like it's like my faith, the ninth house, my faith in life, my faith in myself. And I think I've projected it. I'm like also, it's a house related to teaching. So I like literally teach Pluto. And I love being a teacher. I love my relationships with teachers. And I feel that I've often had a lot of unofficial teachers too, like just people that maybe have a quality to them that I'm like, wow, like I am inspired by that. Or, at times in my life projected that onto people. And it's been a path of learning how to be in these like educational experiences that are like mutually empowering. So being able to recognize that like someone has these gifts or this quality that I want to learn from, but not like disempowering myself in the face of it. And that's happened less with like official teachers and more with the unofficial like relationships that I'm learning from, and like thinking that the other person is my path to the type of life I want to have. Or like, and it's a moon Pluto attachment kind of stuff that I'm speaking to.
Yeah. The moon Pluto. Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm wondering, I feel like I've heard you write about your relationship to the planets as like almost like they're being more like beings who you are channeling or in conversation with, and they're speaking through us, which is one that I recognize for myself as well. How do you like when you think about who is Pluto as opposed to like what is Pluto, how does that shift for you? And do you feel like you have an evolutionary astrology approach to Pluto, or have you found that your own personal gnosis has led you to like kind of your own relationship that might be a little like off the record from just connecting?
I feel like, yeah, there's multiple ways to look at Pluto. Like there can be the mythic lens of it's like Hades, god of the underworld, or it's Kali, like goddess of destruction. But I think that the deepest, like Pluto that I know is just the force of nature itself, and not just terrestrial nature, but like the universe, the Big Bang, that original explosion that rippled into like the galaxies still expanding from it. And it rippled into the development of galaxies and, our planet with an atmosphere and single-celled organisms. And, eventually like these beings that survive, and had to adapt to challenges in the environment, and beings that procreate and mate and whatnot, and how these things I'm talking about with like the universe story are inspired by one of my professors in grad school, Brian Swim. I was practicing evolutionary astrology and went to that school, and like this vision of the universe story really felt plutonic to me. But essentially there's this way that, we have these personal drives, these personal stories, but like every time we have survival anxiety, every time we have desire, turn on, want to bond deeply with another human, that we're actually taking part of something that's really ancient, as old as the universe itself. And so, of course, it's overwhelming as fuck. Like, it's like, it's actually really challenging to our egoic personal concept, because it's a drive inside of us that's so profoundly overwhelming. And then within Pluto and the human response to Pluto, there's a lot that humans do to try to control or tame that force, which, in some sense is like being a citizen. It's like not acting on every single drive that comes up. But we can look at this just in terms of, say, like the question of authenticity. right? That we have like a nature that's showing up. And are we pretending, are we looking a different way on the surface than we're actually feeling internally? So there's this volcanic, like hidden magma, like side of Pluto. And I think that when people have Plutonic initiations, there's often these challenging life experiences that kind of recreate you, have you like have a phoenix experience. So there's almost like a sense of forced abduction into the underworld, like forced confrontation with internal volcanic content. And then this deeper phase of acceptance and being with the potency of that force of nature that is in reality and that lives inside of us. And when we're in relationship to it, it often turns into power, it turns into charisma, it turns into magnetism. When we have coherence at a personality level with who we are at the deepest deep, it's very sexy, like it actually
Yes.
creates an experience in life that is like what we kind of came here for. But it's scary. There's a lot of resistance around it. It's really face melting and ego melting. And so people will try to not go there. And with Pluto, it's like you can kind of go there easily and like with your own, I want to look at these things. I want to, develop myself in these ways. Or we go there in cataclysm, when a natural disaster appears. And I use that word not necessarily as like a literal, like weather natural disaster, like a hurricane, but like a metaphorical one where it's like shit hits the fan in our lives and it feels like we're being forced to reckon with some things that are getting activated by that. I've found in my own experience that just because I work with Pluto doesn't mean that I'm like protected from having shocking events happen in my life. I actually just have like a practice for working with them. And
Mm-hmm.
what I experience too is that sometimes I know better. Like I see when I'm maybe going down a path that's misaligned, where I'm like making these micro decisions that are a little bit off, and then it leads to a little like a blow up of some kind. Versus, and those I can course correct faster. And that's part of my practice. Um, there's also ones where they actually truly shock me because I didn't know better, because it was unconscious. And then I have to go back and take responsibility for my unconscious choices and patterns, which that one is way more sobering, and kind of painful in some sense. But it's um, really, when I get to integrate those lessons, it has rewards in my life moving forward. But it has, I have a lot of compassion for the Pluto experience because it's so ultimately vulnerable. It's so deep. A lot of it's unconscious and it's very universal. Like a lot of, it's interesting because astrology lets us see how special and unique we are, because we are these like very unique signatures. But most of the things that we struggle with are extremely universal and not special. And I feel like
Yeah.
is kind of like those baseline things that we all deal with as a condition of living. And that there's a lot of shame around, there's a lot of taboo stuff around Pluto. And that's where, when we have shame about our instinctual nature, who we really are, what we want, we're going to sidestep it or do these weird little things around it. And so that's where things, it's like an image of a sidewalk, like concrete, and there's little like sprouts of nature that still come through the cracks. Like Pluto is
Yes.
inevitable. And the volcano erupts eventually. Like it wants to happen. It has this certain deeper force and power that's really beyond our preferences and beyond our power to like stave it off forever. So
Yes.
there's something about getting right with that is the like path of that archetype.
Yeah, I love that. And working with shame, I've learned that often when we're not really conscious of or not or circling around what feel like competing desires, like you have a desire for one thing and it's a quote unquote good thing. So you're happy to be conscious about that desire. But then you may have another desire that you feel like might make you look like a bad person, or might make you look selfish, or might make you look greedy, or who knows. Then like we will not look at that desire and shame it basically. But then the consequence is that we're just not very clear people in our actions and our words, because the desire is still there, whether we are going to let ourselves have compassion for it and participate with it or not.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I think it's so, I feel like we can't be puritanical about Pluto. I think there's like so much effort to sanitize our inner life, in terms of how it gets represented in our, good person above world, like who we make ourselves to be, to the world or to ourselves. And it's like, to me, I think it's more interesting. I think it's more embodied to like be with those taboo or like those deeper urges within, and that there is skill with them too. I think this path has taught me a lot about it being okay to be messy, that like
Mhm.
if I'm chaotic or if I make mistakes, that's like okay. Like it doesn't mean something about me per se. Like I can work to be more refined or clear, but it's not like I have to be perfect at all costs. Like it's okay to be messy. Um, it's okay to have rage. It's okay to be angry. Um,
Mhm.
it's okay to be so incredibly turned on, to like really have a strong desire. Like all of these things, if I just learn how to actually hold them and be with them, then I can like choose how I work with them in some sense, or feel the pulse of truth inside of them than how they want to guide me. But I think the first step is just even being willing to face and feel. It's a very emotional experience to like feel those drives, like feel those intense sensations, as opposed to trying to kill the sensation or fix it or run away from it. That's, I
Yeah.
think, where it starts.
So in your different teaching containers, because I know you have the the kind of foundational level one that I know is opening soon. Is that right? That's correct, yes.
Yeah, the
Um,
Evolutionary Astrology Intensive. Yeah.
you have that, and then you have graduate. Like if you've taken that, you can go to these more advanced spaces. I don't know how you would phrase it, but do you find that these different containers become alchemical for students in the sense of they're not just learning astrology, but they're learning how to hold their desires and bring things to their conscious awareness as they learn the language and play with the language with one another?
Yeah, yeah. Like the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive, it's really about building literacy with this form of astrology. So we do cover Pluto, and Pluto is like the underlying kind of archetype, but we cover all the archetypes. So sometimes people have their like they're getting taught by the field in some sense, where they have. I had a student recently call it like side quests with the signs every day, but they're
Hmm.
just having these like direct experience with the zodiac signs. So like the intention behind the course is to translate and transmit the archetypes so that my students can catch them, feel them, and have their own relationship to them. And that, and like learning Pluto, how to put it all together, how to think about our lives from a more taking responsibility for our power, where that shows up in our life story. Like that's part of what happens in the intensive. And then in the advanced containers, like I had meteorite, currently have the diviner. Those are like specific kind of frequency experiences of just kind of going farther and like traveling together as a group and kind of like a salon style experience. Because what I've noticed is that the evolutionary astrology intensive gets us on the same page, and it's a really deep foundational space. I think, it's been all levels this whole time. I love having beginners and advanced people there and everyone in between. And there's something very like multivalent about the class where people at any level will have a big experience with it. Because I feel this too as a advanced, practitioner in astrology, that when I enter classrooms that are even beginner astrology, like I have huge openings, because I'm not too arrogant to be a beginner in astrology again. But also like my course, I made it really penetrating and mythopoetic and expansive so that it can still entertain the advanced people. But yeah, there is that really like a deeper literacy and conversant with the cosmos quality to it. And the Pluto focus is the nature of this particular lens of astrology, where that's like an underlying interpretive point of the chart. So there is a way to like, we can talk about our sun signs and like talk about our inner planets, and those stories are there, but they're happening with Pluto at the root. So learning how to build that synthesis and the natal interpretation gives everything that like deeper undercurrent of what's actually happening unconsciously.
Yeah. Are you excited to be doing it now with Pluto and Aquarius?
Yes, I thought I didn't like Pluto and Aquarius at first. I had nerves about it. I was like, I could just be comfortable with Pluto and Capricorn forever. I had definitely had some initiatory experiences with Pluto and Aquarius already, but then I started to like really love it. Like I feel like there's something, there's a paradigm opening quality of Pluto and Aquarius, and there's something really new and experimental about it, not just because of the sign Aquarius, but because it's like my whole practice with Pluto has been with Pluto and Capricorn. It's like the thing I've known this whole time. And I think that there's such a focus of like history and going back in time with Pluto and Capricorn, and like kind of still being in a historical story. And Aquarius, you can pop out, you can just teleport to new places, which I think
Yes.
is powerful and also has its own disempowerment, because people can be in a totally off side channel of reality that has no grounding, but it's like real enough feeling. So I think there's something about Pluto and Aquarius about integration, the power of integration, but knowing that you can like travel to a new realm, and that new realm is more efficacious if it can be integrated. And that's the same thing with like peak experiences of like having radical life openings and then going back to normal life and being like, oh fuck, I really liked life at the festival. Now I have to go back to work, and just like finding out like how to be more visionary, how to be more like, what's the revolution that's wanting to happen in our lives? Because if we have a part of our lives with Pluto and Aquarius that's like drudgery and like really irritating us and we want change, it's like we either have to change our relationship to that part of our lives, or we may have to change that part of our lives. I think it's really asking for integration. So I think yeah, I'm starting to like it. How do you feel about Pluto and Aquarius?
I feel like those first few weeks, I was just feeling very aware of
The
like
first ingress or the second?
really more this last one. Last spring, I felt very exciting. I was holding my spring container magician's table and doing it together. It just felt really exciting, and I was all for it. I'm still all for it. but I did really feel almost like a a cry of pain at like what's being asked of us in terms of a shift. Like it was almost like a rip or something that I feel now is starting to um like we're starting to feel more flexible because something just like opened that where we were stiff or something, and that there's like a new bend that's possible. We just have to get used to using these new tools that have come in. It
Yeah.
sounds really abstract, but it just kind of felt in my body almost like if something kind of like if you suddenly could move your arms to like a different um level than you normally can, and it feels like a crack or a rip, and then now you're getting used to having more movement or something.
That completely lands because I mean it's like a fixed air sign and it's a
Mm.
fixed sign, and Pluto is very confrontational. So Pluto coming for a fixed energy would kind of
Mm.
crack. Like that's kind of the style, you know? But
Uh-huh.
then like the breakthrough, like the yeah, I've had this image in ceremony recently of like an egg that was like cracking with like lightning patterns, which I mean, that is kind of what a cracked egg looks like, the shape of lightning, but it was like
Yes.
glowing and like lightning and just being like, it's very uncomfortable to be that cracking egg, but that's like the birth pain of the new world, right? So after you
Mm.
habituate to that discomfort, it's like you have this whole, yeah, whole new world to be inside of.
Yeah. And it feels like what if we don't have to each figure out what this means by ourselves, but we just figure out together, you know? And
Yeah.
so it's like self-isolating is probably not the move as much as extending yourself into being with other humans who are also trying to figure this thing out.
I love that. I really felt this Aquarius season and with Pluto ingressing, this desire come up to have shared visionary experiences because I can go into trance, I have dreams and whatnot, but I'm like really excited these days when I have a dream or a friend has a dream and we talk about it. And then the dream starts to unfold for both of us. Like we can keep talking about it, or we have an I Ching divination experience and we're talking about it. Like I like this open source, like group sourcing, dream divination, magic ceremony. Like I'm just noticing that I'm having these breakthroughs that happen as part of a network because of the conversation
Yes.
and that makes me feel this deeper, richer sense of belonging and like joy in life than just
Hmm.
me having a private visionary experience. That's actually where I start to feel um, lonely, maybe a little bit stuck sometimes. And I love the visionary capacity I have. It's just like not, I remember it used to turn me on so deeply to discover that I had access to this magical realm. And that was like enough. But now I'm like, it needs to be shared. I want to share it. I want to be in it with people.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because it does feel very true to me lately that like more than before, different people I'm hearing like same thing, different places. Like I'll see a post and by somebody else, and it's really what's going on in my imaginal. And it's like we're all talking through this collective field, and it feels very exciting.
It is.
So, yay. So, tell me what else is going on in your world right now. How can people learn with you, connect with you in the coming months?
So, the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive is starting on April 2nd, and applications for tuition assistance are open through March 15th and then generally through March 29th. Um, if people are hearing this farther out in the future than that, like I do run this course again. And I encourage you to come when you feel called or you're feeling that like magic around it. It's a really world-opening experience. And then I'm also teaching an ongoing, it's a workshop series with my collaborator, Eliza Penelope. We're teaching about the houses. So we just taught about the astronomy and like what makes up the houses as a big system. And now we're going through all the houses individually. So I share about that on Instagram and in my mailing list, Magic of the Spheres podcast, like all those places. And then otherwise, I'm sharing forecasts and writing pretty consistently across my channels. And a new like advanced container will be opening. I feel like it's still brewing, like it's still in this like gestational phase, but when it's ready to be born, I'll announce it.
Yummy. Well, thank you for coming on Moon to Moon, Sabrina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Fan.
I'm such a fan. I love our synergy and our resonances.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to Sabrina Monarch for playing with me and hanging out, talking about charts, talking about the nodes, Pluto, and evolutionary astrology with me and with Moon to Moon. For those of you who are excited to potentially join Sabrina in one of her classes, I'm encouraging you to go to the links in the show notes and get more information. From my end, if you're listening to this before the deadline of the night of March 20th, we are at the very end now of Magician's Table Promo 2024. The next time I create an episode, the door will be closed. We will be inside together. And it's been a long promo. I wanted to have a lot of spaciousness for this promo because it is so ambitious this year, with 3 13th readers and 3 cohorts. Never been so ambitious with the reach, the breadth, and also the resources that I've dreamed into place to be providing for the magicians here. So, as those of you who've been around know, especially if you've been in this container, my spring is usually a more quiet time for my other work because the Magician's Table is very energetically intensive, and it's important for me to be very present with it and very grounded with it. And so I hope to be in Moon to Moon regularly. I have some incredible interviews coming up that I'm really excited about. And also, I don't know. We'll just see what happens. I know I'm going to be really busy with launch stuff too. And I'm incubating some other offerings that I'll be announcing when they're ready for me to talk about them. But for right now, we're at the end of Magician's Table. If you're hearing this and you've been wanting this, or if you're curious about this, it may already be full when you hear about it because we only have a couple spots left. But I know that there are 1, 2, maybe 3 more people max, because I have 33 of 36 folks who are already through the door. They are hungry. They are at the table, ready to eat. But I have 3 empty seats. I have 2 people who have been invited to take their chair. They haven't sat down yet. So until they've sat down, those chairs are still empty according to how I think about them. And then I have 1 real, legit empty seat. And so in the next 48 hours, 2 to 3 days, I am calling those last few in. There's nothing like doors closing to bring some of y'all in. I know myself, almost everything that I do is a doors closing thing. Like, I don't even see it until the email says doors closing. This is just how I am. Like, I don't sign up for things unless it says doors are closing. Because that's just kind of how my brain works. I love the constriction, it's like, constriction, it's like this Capricorn kink around time. And it's like, time is running out. It's so overwhelming. So my guess is that y'all last few people coming through, y'all who may be coming through today, maybe tomorrow, y'all just love this constriction too. And no shame for me, because that is how I sign up for things. I like it. For me, signing up early always feels like someone's taking my choices away or something. But from the end of holding the space, I love the people who sign up early, right? Like, I love it when folks sign up early, because then I know what I'm dealing with as the space holder. But when the roles are reversed, I am the person who signs up at the end. And so I also have a lot of love for those who, that's just how they are. And what they require from me is just more trust. Like, I just have to trust that they're coming. They're enjoying the constriction process, and they're going to do it when they absolutely have to. And I respect that. All right. I really want to leave an episode for y'all soon, just to tell you about what it's been like the last few weeks. I've gotten so many messages from people that are like, what is it like to be you right now? Between the book and the astrology podcast and just finishing Unshaming the Signs and publicity, and it's definitely been a wave, and I'm still really writing it. I'm grateful for my tools. I'm grateful how I've learned to hold myself. I don't think that this would have been appropriate any earlier on my timeline. Like, all timing is perfect. My younger self would have loved, I thought, to have had this happen earlier, but I am really glad that it's now, because I feel really grounded through the waves, and I know who I am, and I know where my support is, and I know how to care for myself when, not all the comments are sweet, even though most of them are. And that is like, I had to build up to being in a place where I can just be like, oh, it's not personal, I know who I am. That is like a lifetime coming for me. And I do feel really, really proud that I was just able to take a week off with my daughters for spring break and with Matt and his kids, and really just kind of keep this whole big, massive thing that's happening in my career, like, over there, just over there. Because right now I'm with my loved ones, and being able to do that in this, like, really grounded way, staying in presence, staying with who I'm with, and not to mention, like, being able to pay for things and provide in ways that I could only dream of a few years ago. It's just incredible. I have this workshop I'm going to be doing in the spring called From Underdog to Diva. I cannot help myself. I have to laugh every time I say it. But it's going to be free for all magicians. I also could call it From Damsel in Distress to Sugar Daddy. Because that is like legit archetype swap that I've been in. I've like bridged this damsel in distress to sugar daddy pipeline. It's not really a pipeline though, because I think that's the wrong use of pipeline. Yeah, I've like flipped the fucking script of my lineage. I flipped it. I fucking flipped it. And that deserves a lot of time and attention and nuance and care. And I'm preparing a workshop to support everyone who's like, that's the bridge I want to be on, or like, that's the archetype shift I want for myself. And, you know, it's not like I think every template that works for me is going to work for everyone, but I've got things to say. And like, as I usually teach, I like to teach in the most flexible way possible so that everyone who comes can make the template theirs and not like a BL template, you know, Brit LaRue. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Thanks for celebrating Moon to Moon. And if you're new here, welcome. I hope you find a home here. If you love Moon to Moon and you've never left a review, I would be so, so very grateful. It is such a day maker. It's so sweet to read the notes. And other than that, until next time, happy equinox.